Thank you for staying with us. And today we are focusing on Nigerian standing in the global stage, the health of our diplomacy. My guest will do justice to this question. He is a professor of history and international security studies, Department of History and International Studies, Akwa Ibom State University. He's an author. Standing in the strategic intelligence community, Professor Otobasi Akman Spectrum.
Good morning, Stan. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. First of all, just the previous week, we had a situation where a young Nigerian lady contesting in South Africa, South African citizen, again that's disputed, but it seems as if the issue wasn't just about, it reflected on the health of the South African Nigerian relationship. And today we are seeing Nigerian presidential jets being seized by a court in Paris over some business gone wrong between Ogun State and a Chinese company. How does this reflect on Nigerians' diplomatic health?
Again, thank you for having me. When we are dealing with diplomacy, first of all, it's to manage international relations by negotiation, and you use tact and intelligence. But again, when you are dealing with contractual agreement, though part of diplomacy, it is strictly, part of international law. So we are dealing first with the issue of international law with regards to the seizure of presidential jets. Even though, like I said, it has to be, it's an aspect of diplomacy in the sense that those jets were not seized in Sokoto, but were seized outside the country. The larger picture is that it is part of international law, and here we look at the clauses in the or the obligations in the contractual agreements between Party A and Party B, and what could happen if you fail to live up to the obligations. Then the other issue with regards to South Africa also has to do with diplomatic engagement, in the sense that at the end of the day, what is most important to nations is that they try to strengthen their national interest. So whatever a nation does is as a result of the national interest. Nothing goes out of the spectrum of that interest.
Well, looking at that, because the question has risen again and again that the previous administration, in trying to garner loans, went on to use as collateral some of our national strategic assets. Because we've never really seen in full print the breakdown of these contracts, which beggars the question. The Nigerian state and the political players, as we have them over the past how many years, have they really played this international diplomacy game of state interest according to that rule, or they've been rather approaching it from a self-interest point of view?
Well, I will talk about national interest. And they're introducing another issue bordering on interest. Yes, nations and even people, individuals, pursue interest, self-interest. In fact, national interest is just a projection of the interests of the population of the country. So we will still talk about self-interest. Government is a continuum. Even though we are operating a democracy such that you have tenures, of 4 years, then 8 years maximum. If one government entered into contract domestically or internationally, and the contract did not come to an end before another government took over, the other government, would have to pay for all these contractual obligations, because what we know is that the government continues. A nation lives forever, in most cases, but the operators don't live forever. So whatever agreements they made would be, taken forward by the incoming government. After all, the incoming government has to take care of liabilities and assets. So yes, there are a number of assets that have. You also have a number of liabilities. But one thing I will have to point out here is that there is always the need for nations, and in this case we're talking about Nigeria, to make sure that whatever obligation or whatever contractual obligations they have, they take into consideration the future generations. Otherwise, they would, be giving the future generations burden that they cannot bear. Or you have situations that the nation is at all times embarrassed as a result of the fact that K was not taken properly to look into the books before you appended signatures. Once you initial your signatures, you have, obligated the nation. In other words, you've obligated more than 200 million people. And for that reason, K must at all times be taken. Because if you soft-pedal on your laws, other countries don't soft-pedal on their laws and international laws.
So, Prof, let me pick you up on that. In international diplomacy, one of the rules of the game is that you keep your cards close to your chest. So government will always have secrets because there are some information that cannot be allowed to be on the public domain, so that it would help facilitate the diplomatic engagement. This is known everywhere. But then again, you also have situations where sometimes this secret now becomes a problem, because some government officials would, in the name of the official secret art and providing protecting diplomatic communication, would hide corrupt practices using this means. There have been calls for more transparency with regards to government engagement and even government to private sector engagement. How would you respond to that?
Yes, it is true that in diplomacy you have several aspects of secrecy. But then it is this secrecy that led to the First World War. After the First World War, we, increasingly have been having open diplomacy. So you tell your people the kind of things that you engage yourself in. You tell your countrymen and women what you've contracted. And most importantly, since we have National Assembly, the National Assembly must be in the know about what you have done outside there. Because at the end of the day, you will find out that all members of the National Assembly are representing Nigerians. In other words, Nigerians are in that National Assembly. So you have to tell them. Yes, on the other part of secrecy, we know that secrecy is holiness. But then you have a committee in both houses, both chambers of the National Assembly, House of Reps and the Senate, that should know. And you also have experts that these committee members would consult. So it is not entirely a secret thing known to a few people. there are selected human beings or selected Nigerians who should be in the know. And of course, yes, in the public service, you have a kind of oath of secrecy. But when this secrecy is anti-national interest, then of course you have to you have to know what to do.
That beggars that question again of national interest and the self-interest of political players and leaders, because sometimes it doesn't align. Again, we are finding out that some of the reasons why we've not been able to meet the crude oil obligation to local refineries is because of some crude oil that have been sold in the Buhari regime ahead, and money is collected, and we are having a situation where we can't even meet our own local demand. But away from that, and taking a look to our diplomatic engagement within ECOWAS, Nigeria's tenure has elapsed, and we have the Sierra Leonean president as the new chairman of ECOWAS moving ahead. And under Tinubu's watch, we've had a situation where three francophone countries, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, have disengaged from ECOWAS. Some have said that has affected the fabric of the ECOWAS cohesion. But when you look at our response to it, first of all, we came out against the coup, calling for intervention if the coup planners did not reverse their course, which only made them double down. But in the end, we lost them from ECOWAS, at least temporarily. We've seen Senegalese president and a few other presidents trying to walk that tightrope of diplomacy to see if they could get them back. But my question now would be, was that the right approach? Because some would say that we were trying to pander to the French and American interests, because these people in Niger and Mali were kicking the French out and seemingly embracing the Russians, and we're finding ourselves in that place of geopolitical high-stake games. Was the move of putting so much pressure, closing the border between Nigeria and Niger and ending trade, was that necessary? Was that the right move?
Yes, thank you very much. First, let me respond to the earlier discussion about crude oil sales and other things.
Go ahead, sir.
That today we are having we are feeling the effects. Yes, we should blame the National Assembly for not performing its function well. Because apart from representation, we also have oversight functions. Yeah. And the National Assembly is supposed to know what happens in most of the public service and institutions in the country. And like I said, these things are chain up, because at the end of the day, what affects one sector affects the other sectors. And to that extent, we should be careful about the kind of obligations that we enter into. And like I said before, the future generations should be taken into consideration. Now on ECOWAS, first of all, from the very onset, ECOWAS did not do the right thing, which is what is tormenting it. When we are dealing with international organizations, of course, international economic organizations like ECOWAS have started in 1975. It was Nigeria that even initiated it, and at the time alongside with Togo. Nigeria ought to have had that kind of relationship with Togo first, and then they lay out the standards upon which other nations will become members. But what we had was an attempt to make sure that all the geographical territories called ECOWAS, called West Africa, were members. And from there you had a problem. You look at the EU, it started with 6, but today you have more than 27, because they laid the conditions upon which other nations that needed membership could fulfill. And what plays out in ECOWAS today has to do with, again, national interests, like I said before. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are Sahel states in a sub-region called Sahel, and they have peculiar problems, peculiar challenges. And these challenges were based on nationalistic elements, and where the politicians or the political class could not fast track on them, the military had to come in. It is not as if we want military leadership in countries. No. But once they have this, we ought to have known that, yes, we're dealing with the military leadership in this country. And we'll have filled the line of negotiation. But then, if we needed to have used force, force would have been appropriate within 24 hours. In any coup that lasts more than 24 hours has succeeded. And to that extent, you go the way of negotiation. In order to see to their challenges. And again, when you see people, as followers, protesting and welcoming such leadership, then you know that you are no longer dealing with the military brass, but you also have to deal with the entire nation. And that would still bring us back to the dynamics of negotiation. When this failed, and when the people were sanctioned, these nations were sanctioned, they were looking out for relief elsewhere. And they got through some other external forces like Russia and so on and so forth. I will not agree with some people that Nigeria was trying to the French or the Western line. I wouldn't agree to that. Nigeria is a power in Africa, and most so in West Africa. And it was in the best interest of Nigeria not to allow any of these countries, to leave ECOWAS. But if he has taken this line, there is nothing anyone can do, because countries try to fulfill their national interests, not the interests of other nations in the world.
Professor, let me get back to that, because this is not the first time we are experiencing coup d'etats in those countries. For instance, a country like Mali has seen perhaps 3 coups in the past 10 years, at least. And in the past, we've had situations where some of these coups seemingly had the backing of these Western powers. In Chad, for instance, when we had a situation where the former president of Chad, Idriss Deby, was killed, and his son took over through means that were not necessarily constitutionally sanctioned. We saw the West, particularly the French president, come out to say, look, no matter what we do, constitution be damned, this is our man. And Nigeria seemed to just suck it up under Buhari. And this playing out, we came out with a full chest. What I'm wondering, because some people will now say, we were now looking as if we're towing the Western line, or perhaps we were looking at inward and looking at our own peculiar situation and trying to forestall a similar reoccurrence. What would you say?
It is not as if Nigeria was doing the Western line.
Okay.
In strategic engagement, there is something that is called signaling. Signaling is hard and harsh communication to your opponent in order to deter him from taking some actions. And of course, when signaling fails, you may have to use force. Nigeria tried with signaling, but at the same time, domestic factors never allowed the consideration of the use of force. Don't forget that in that axis, northern axis, you have several local government areas that members are also of the same ethnic stock with those in Niger Republic. Yeah. In fact, Niger Republic has 55.5 ethnic consanguinity with Nigerians. So to that extent, when you have 65% that have ethnic affiliations with Nigerians in Nigeria, then it's something that you have to treat carefully. And I believe that from the onset, the government did not know about this. The government did not also know that these people will come out to oppose this. My dear, from Nigeria up to southern Libya, you have lots of people of Nigerian descent, which is why our diplomacy must be cultural in dimension, because all of these people constitute the larger Nigeria. So a number of persons said there was no need to engage in this, because that would automatically mean that you are fighting some other regions in Nigeria. These are extra regions of this country. So I think based on that, the government had to backtrack and never went ahead to launch any attack. But the first of such action was signaling, to signal to the coupists that yes, we can move beyond this. Again, if you've had experience of coups like you talked about, Kenya or Mali and other countries, note Nigeria has the largest number of coups in West Africa, about 12 in number. And we've had democracy for more than 20 years. And for you to push the frontiers of democracy, you also have to push the frontiers of anti-coup, whether in Nigeria or elsewhere. And I guess this was the posture of the Tinubu government, that in order to secure democracy in Nigeria, he has to secure democracy in the neighborhoods of Nigeria. So for me, I don't see that it had anything to do with
Western interests.
Pandering to Western powers.
Okay, let's take a listen. Prof, I'd like you to take a listen to Paul Kufo, coordinator of West Africa Democracy Solidarity. Had a meeting. Let's just take a listen to what he said, and we ask that question again of how to prevent coups and the role of democratic institutions in doing that. Let's play that video.
I think ECOWAS recognizes the need to hold on to the stability of the sub-region, and they are putting forward a lot of measures to ensure that the sub-region remains intact and unified as it is. We've analyzed the implications of this exit, that it is likely to cause further instability and disintegrate the sub-region. It also has socio-economic implications, because what will happen to the citizens from these countries staying in countries that belongs to ECOWAS but has no relationship with these countries that have exited. What we have failed to do is to keep a constant watch and oversight on the norms and values that we set for democracy, especially the institutions for delivering the promise and aspirations of democracy must be working. And here we're talking about institutions like the local government system must be well connected to citizens. So we need to revisit the conversation around democracy and get the institutions to work. Because the institutions that connect citizens to whatever government.
So that was Kufo there, raising that question again. And recently we saw this situation a few weeks ago, a few days ago, can't call it weeks now, with some Nigerians going to the streets to express their upset with the government, particularly with regards to how the economy has run. And we saw some things happen. One of them was, of course, the wanton looting and vandalism. But the other thing that happened that caught people's attention was we saw people waving foreign flags, particularly the flags of the Russian Federation and the flags of the Chinese Republic. This issues of institutions not delivering in the dividends of democracy. We're talking about the values of democracy, and we are not seeing it. We are just talking about it. We keep talking about democracy, but democracy is not expressed in people's pockets and stomachs. And we are finding people, just like it happened in these countries we just discussed about, Mali and co. We're having people express dissent and say government is not doing well, and even calling for support, foreign support. How do we address this issue, particularly with making sure that our political office holders, the ruling class, listen to this particular issue and address the issue of functional institutions and delivering on value?
One issue about coup d'etat in any country is a response to challenges in the nation. But again, like I always said, it is not because you have challenges then you call for more crisis. Now, in those other countries, you will note that where you do not have development or aspects of development, or where you don't have change, positive change, then the people would call for change of any kind. First of all, that you should change and do the right thing, or that there should be change from any other sources. For all these, the countries that you mentioned, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, the people call for change through the military, that the military should come, and of course the military listened and responded. But when we are dealing with a democracy, take note that democracy is not the best form of government. It is not. Autocracy is better than democracy by far. But what happens with regards to democracy is liberty, most especially civil liberty, guaranteed by the democratic norms and practices. But in the practice of democracy, you also note that it's full of crises, conflicts and crises. You have oppositions here and there who are not seeing things the way you see. And when you engage in such a system of government, all that you need to do is to allow the institutions to take care of the development of the country. The institutions must be fertile, ample, and of course strengthened. Where you don't have such, then you must have a problem. Again, democracy cannot flourish well where you do not have a high standard of living and where the educational attainment of people is low. So you know that you have a problem. And when you have a problem, do not allow their citizens to go outside the streets, the roads, and the cities to protest, because you have a number of elements who would seize these, who would use these opportunities to do whatever they like.
But wouldn't that be the situation where we should get the security agents?
Which is what happened in Nigeria recently. There is no way that you call out people and then you will not be outnumbered by those who don't think the way that you think. You had looting, destruction of lives and property, and of course, you also had the oppressive encounters with the agents of government.
Okay, I was trying to say, wouldn't that have been a situation where the security agencies would have been prepared to handle those miscreants? But before then, let me pick you back on an earlier point you made. You were talking about democracy as not being the best form of government. You mentioned, was it theocracy you said? How so?
of theocracy, authoritarianism, and so on and so forth.
They are better than democracy?
Yes, better than democracy.
Why?
In the sense that
Why
at
so?
the end of the day, I am coming. At the end of the day, we're talking about economic development and higher standard of living for the citizens. And if you look at the countries, not Europe, because Europe has existed, they have practiced this for centuries. When you look at those countries in the third world that have been able to move into the second or first world, they have always been ruled by benevolent autocrats.
I'm sure you're going to mention Singapore.
Singapore, I am coming.
Yeah, but which other one?
Singapore is not as big as a local government here.
Exactly.
But it has 7 million people, and it's in the first world. Okay? And the leader was there for some years. But again, when you are dealing with democracy, and I'm telling you that it's not the best form of government. But when you see situations like that, democracy guarantees freedom and civil liberties. These would outclass what you have in authoritarianism. But again, when you have situations like this, allow the institutions of government to function at their best. And if you allow such to function at their best, of course you won't have problems. And I also said that democracy is full of conflicts and crises. And therefore, all mechanisms of conflict resolution and crisis management must be put to use.
Okay.
And then the last one that I could say that would equate or even overwhelm autocracy or authoritarianism is that you must have a plan of action, a blueprint of about a generation, so that you can tell your children and grandchildren, wait, from this blueprint, in 10 years' time, this is what will come to this area. From this blueprint, in 5 years' time, this is the project that we will have. And when you do that, then you are giving hope to the people. Because at the end of the day, as is always said, give the inhabitants of the towers of Babel common trait or hope, they will learn to speak one language. But when you don't give people hope, they can never speak one language. And you can only give people hope in a democracy when the institutions are fertile and functional. You can only give people hope when you have properly designed plan of action. And of course, the plan of action is in the future.
Prof, so much to say and so little time to say it. But before I let you go, last couple of months ago, you had your inaugural lecture at Akwa Ibom State University. And one of the things you advocated for, which was the key of your lecture, creating the Office of the Historian General to facilitate peace, security, and development in Nigeria. In 30 seconds, why?
You said, please come again.
I said we're out of time, but I was trying to mention that your inaugural lecture was titled Creating Office of the Historian General to facilitate peace, security, and development. In 30 seconds.
It was titled Thinking the Thinkable.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
The content was to direct the attention of the gatekeepers to the things that they are supposed to do in order to bring about security and development. And we're giving them alternative routes to some of the challenges that if we step on some of these routes, of course, we'll solve our problems by more than 90%. So it had to do with the ideas that could fuel actions and actions that could lead to justice and
network barely leading us to close to an end there. A very phenomenal engagement with Professor Otto Basiakpan. Professor Otto Basiakpan, is a professor of international ideas and security studies. He teaches international diplomacy at the University of Akwa Ibom State University. Pardon me. What an engaging discussion. I'm sure we're going to try to bring him back to complete some of the other areas we've not touched. But that's how far we can go today on Political Spectrum. Big thanks to Professor Otoba there. But next week we're going to continue the program and bringing you fresh perspective to what's been playing out across the political landscape in Nigeria. So enjoy the rest of your week, of course, but also stay, if you can, to be part of the rest of our programming. My name is Ifyok Umoika, signing out.